Hey everyone, this is the third section of part one of Anton Pannekoek's Workers' Councils. Part one of the book is called The Task. Section one was titled Labor, Section two was titled Law and Property, and Section three, which I'm reading in this video, is titled Shop Organization. The section after this, Section four, is titled Social Organization. I'm recording these videos at one at a time just because I feel like it'll make a nice series of videos in less than an hour, as opposed to if I read the entire part, it might be a very long video and not so many people would want to listen to it. So I apologize if these are kind of scattered a bit, but and not concentrated, but then I'd also be sorry if they were concentrated. So pick your poison. I think I'm picking the right poison. Anyway, Section 3, Shop Organization. Thus the idea of their common ownership of the means of production is beginning to take hold of the minds of the workers. Once they feel the new order, their own mastery over labor to be a matter of necessity and of justice, all their thoughts and all their actions will be consecrated to its realization. They know that it cannot be done at once. A long period of fight will be unavoidable. To break the stubborn resistance of the ruling classes, the workers will have to exert the workers' utmost forces. All the powers of mind and character, of organization and knowledge, which the workers are capable of mustering, must be developed. And first of all, the workers must have to make clear to themselves what it is the workers aim at, what this new order means. Man, when he has to do a work, first conceives it in his mind as a plan, a more or less conscious design. This distinguishes the actions of man from the instinctive actions of animals. This also holds, in principle, for the common struggles, the revolutionary action of the social classes. Not entirely, to be sure. There is a great deal of unpremeditated, spontaneous impulse in their outbursts of passionate revolt. The fighting workers are not an army conducted after a neatly conceived plan of action by a staff of able leaders. The fighting workers are a people gradually rising out of submissiveness and ignorance, gradually coming to consciousness of their exploitation, again and again driven to fight for better living conditions, by degrees developing their powers. New feelings spring up in their hearts, new thoughts arise in their heads, how the world might and should be. New wishes, new ideals, new aims fill their mind and direct their will and action. Their aims gradually take a more concise shape. From the simple strife for better working conditions. In the beginning, they grow into the idea of a fundamental reorganization of society. For several generations already, the ideal of a world without exploitation and oppression has taken hold of the minds of the workers. Nowadays, the conception of the workers themselves, master of the means of production, themselves directing their labor, arises ever more strongly in their minds. This new organization of labor we have to investigate and to clarify to ourselves and to one another, devoting to it the best powers of our mind. We cannot devise it as a fantasy. We derive it from the real conditions and needs of present work and present workers. It cannot, of course, be depicted in detail. We do not know the future conditions that will determine its precise forms. Those forms will take shape in the minds of the workers then facing the task. We must content ourselves for the present to trace the general outlines only, the leading ideas that will direct the actions of the working class. They will be as the guiding stars that in all the vicissitudes of victory and adversity and fight, of success and failure in organization, keep the eyes steadily directed towards the great goal. They must be elucidated not by minute descriptions of detail, but chiefly by comparing the principles of the new world with the known forms of existing organizations. When the workers seize the factories to organize the work, on an immensity of new and difficult problems arise before them, but they dispose of an immensity of new powers also. A new system of production never is an artificial structure erected at will. A new system arises as an irresistible process of nature, as a convulsion moving society in its deepest entrails, evoking the mightiest forces and passions in man. It is the result of a tenacious and probably long class struggle. The forces required for construction can develop and grow up in this fight only. What are the foundations of the new society? They are the social forces of fellowship and solidarity, of discipline and enthusiasm, the moral forces of self-sacrifice and devotion to the community, the spiritual forces of knowledge, of courage and perseverance. The firm organization that binds all these forces into a unity of purpose, all of them are the outcome of the class fight. They cannot purposefully be prepared in advance. Their first traces arise spontaneously in the workers out of their common exploitation, and then they grow incessantly through the necessities of the fight, under the influence of experience and of mutual inducement and instruction. They must grow because their fullness brings victory, their deficiency defeat. But even after a success in fighting, attempts at new construction must fail, so long as the social forces are insufficient, so long as the new principles do not entirely occupy the workers' hearts and minds. And in that case, since mankind must live, since production must go on, other powers of constraint, dominating and suppressing forces, will take the production in their hands. So the fight has to be taken up ever anew, till the social forces in the working class have reached such a height as to render them capable of being the self-governing masters of society. The great task of the workers is the organization of production on a new basis. It has to begin with the organization within the shop. Capitalism, too, had a carefully planned shop organization, but the principles of the new organization are entirely different. The technical basis is the same in both cases, is the discipline of work imposed by the regular running of the machines. But the social basis, the mutual relations of men, are the very opposite of what they were. Collaboration of equal companions replaces the command of masters and the obedience of servants. The sense of duty, the devotion to the community, the praise or blame of the comrades according to efforts and achievements, as incentives take the place of fear for hunger and perpetual risk of losing the job. Instead of the passive utensils and victims of capital, the workers are now the self-reliant masters and organizers of production, exalted by the proud feeling of being active cooperators in the rise of a new humanity. The ruling body in this shop organization is the entirety of the collaborating workers. They assemble to discuss matters and in assembly take their decisions, so everybody who takes part in the work takes part in the regulation of the common work. This is all self-evident and normal, and the method seems to be identical to that followed when under capitalism groups or unions of workers had to decide by vote on the common affairs. But there are essential differences. In the unions, there was usually a division of tasks between the officials and the members. The officials prepared and devised the proposals, and members voted. With their fatigued bodies and weary minds, the workers had to leave the conceiving to others. It was only in part or in appearance that they managed their own affairs. In the common management of the shop, however, they have to do everything themselves, the conceiving, the devising, as well as the deciding. Devotion and emulation not only play their role in everybody's work task, but are still more essential in the common task of regulating the whole. First, because it is the all-important common cause, which they cannot leave to others. Secondly, because it deals with the mutual relations in their own work, in which they are all interested and all competent, which therefore commands their profound considerations, and which through thorough discussion must settle. So it is not only the bodily, but still more the mental effort bestowed by each in his participation in the general regulation that is the object of competition and appreciation. The discussion, moreover, must bear another character than in societies and unions under capitalism, where there are always differences of personal interest. There, in his deeper consciousness, everybody is concerned with his own safeguarding, and discussions have to adjust and to smooth out these differences in the common action. Here, however, in the new community of labor, all the interests are essentially the same, and all thoughts are directed to the common aim of effective cooperative organization. In great factories and plants, the number of workers is too large to gather in one meeting, and far too large for a real and thorough discussion. Here decisions can only be taken in two steps. by the combined action of assemblies of the separate sections of the plant and assemblies of central committees of delegates. The functions and the practice of these committees cannot exactly be ascertained in advance now. They are entirely new, an essential part of the new economic structure. When facing the practical needs of the workers will develop the practical structure. Yet something of their character may, in general lines, be derived by comparing them with bodies and organizations known to us. In the old capitalist world, central committees of delegates are a well-known institution. We have them in parliaments, in all kinds of political bodies, and in leading boards of societies and unions. They are invested with authority over their constituents, or even rule over them as their masters. As such, it is in line with a social system of a working mass of people exploited and commanded by a ruling minority. Now, however, the task is to build up a form of organization for a body of collaborating free producers, actually and mentally controlling their common productive action, regulating their common productive action as equals with their own will, a quite different social system. Again, in the old world, we have union councils administering the current affairs after the membership, assembling at greater intervals, have fixed the general policy. Let me repeat that sentence. I think I fucked it up. Again, in the old world, we have union councils administering the current affairs after the membership, assembling at greater intervals, having fixed the general policy. What these councils then have to deal with are the trifles of the day, not vital questions. Now, however, basis and essence of life itself are concerned. The productive work that occupies and has to occupy everybody's mind continually as the one and greatest object of their thoughts. The new conditions of labor make these shop committees something quite different from everything we know in the capitalist world. They are central, but not ruling bodies. They are no governing board. The delegates constituting them have been sent by sectional assemblies with special instructions. They return to these assemblies to report on the discussion and the discussion's results. And after further deliberation, the same or other delegates may go up with new instructions. In such a way, they act as the connecting links between the personnel of the separate sections. Neither are the shop committees bodies of experts to provide the directing regulations for the non-expert multitude. Of course, experts will be necessary, single or in bodies, to deal with the special technical and scientific problems. The shop committees, however, have to deal with the daily proceedings, the mutual relations, the regulation of the work, whereby everybody is expert and at the same time an interested party. Among other items, it is up to them to put into practice what special experts suggest. Nor are the shop committees the responsible bodies for the good management of the whole, with the consequence that every member may shift his part of responsibility upon the impersonal collectivity. On the contrary, whereas this management is incumbent upon all in common, single persons may be consigned special tasks which to fulfill with their entire capacity in full responsibility, whilst they carry all the honors for the achievement. All members of the personnel, men and women, younger and older, who take part in the work, as equal companions take their part in this shop organization, in the actual work as well as in the general regulation. Of course, there will be much difference in the personal tasks, easier or more difficult according to force and capacities, different in character according to inclination and abilities. And, of course, the differences in general insight will give a preponderance to the advice of the most intelligent. At first, when as an inheritance of capitalism, there are large differences in education and training, the lack of good technical and general knowledge in the masses will be felt as a heavy deficiency. Then the small number of highly trained professional technicians and scientists must act as technical leaders, without thereby acquiring a commanding or socially leading position, without gaining privileges other than the estimation of their companions and the moral authority that always attaches to capacity and knowledge. The organization of a shop is the conscious arrangement and connection of all the separate procedures into one whole. All these interconnections of mutually adapted operations may be represented in a well-ordered scheme, a mental image of the actual process. As such, it was present in the first planning and in the later improvements and enlargements. This image must be present in the minds of all the collaborating workers. The collaborating workers all must have a thorough acquaintance with what is their own common affair. Just as a map or a graph fixes and shows in a plane to everyone intelligible picture the connections of a complicated totality, so here the state of the total enterprise at every moment in all its developments must be rendered visible by adequate representations. In numerical form, this is done by bookkeeping. Bookkeeping registers and fixes all that happens in the process of production, what raw material enters the shop, what machines are procured, what products they yield, how much labor is bestowed upon the products, how many hours of work are given by every worker, what products are delivered. It follows and describes the flow of materials through the process of production. It allows continually to compare, in comprehensive accounts, the results with the previous estimates and planning, so the production in the shop is made into a mentally controlled process. Capitalist management of enterprises also knows mental control of the production. Here, too, the proceedings are represented by calculation and bookkeeping. But here is this fundamental difference, that capitalist calculation is adapted entirely to the viewpoint of production of profit. It deals with prices and cost as its fundamental data. Work and wages are only factors in the calculation of the resulting profit on the yearly balance account. In the new system of production, on the other hand, hours of work is the fundamental datum, whether they are still expressed in the beginning in money units or in their own true form. In capitalist production, calculation and bookkeeping is a secret of the direction, the office. It is no concern of the workers. They are objects of exploitation. The workers are only factors in the calculation of cost and produce accessories to the machines. In the production under common ownership, the bookkeeping is a public matter. Bookkeeping lies open to all. The workers have always a complete view of the course of the whole process. Only in this way they are able to discuss matters in the sectional assemblies and in the shop committees, and to decide on what has to be done. The numerical results are made visible, moreover by statistical tables, by graphs and pictures that display the situation at a glance. This information is not restricted to the personnel of the shop. It is a public matter, open to all outsiders. Every shop is only a member in the social production, and also the connection of its doings with the work outside is expressed in the bookkeeping. Thus, insight in the production keep going on in every enterprise is a piece of common knowledge for all the producers. That's the end of section 3, which again was called, the shop floor? Shop organization. Section 4 of part 1 of workers' councils, part 1 being called the task, is titled social organization. That's the next, if you're listening to these videos in sequence at all, that would be the next section. Thank you so much for listening.